The celebration in New Geneva stretched across 50 kilometers of gleaming towers and floating platforms. Humanity had every reason to celebrate. 50 years had passed since the Galactic Council made first contact with Earth, and those 50 years had transformed human civilization beyond recognition. Children born today would never know a world without faster-than-light travel, without alien friends walking beside them in the streets, without the endless possibilities that came from joining the greater galactic community. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Unity station, watching fireworks explode in patterns that defied Earth's old physics. She should have been celebrating with everyone else. She should have been drinking the expensive Zenthari wine and laughing with her colleagues about how far humanity had come. Instead, she stared at the datapad in her hands, reading the same encrypted message for the 100th time, hoping she had translated it wrong. She had not translated it wrong. Sarah had spent 15 years running Earth's intelligence division. Her job was to monitor communications between the 47 member species of the Galactic Council, looking for threats to human interests. It was supposed to be boring work. The Council preached unity and cooperation. Wars were ancient history. Everyone worked together now for the common good. That was the lie they had all believed. The message she had intercepted came from the Zenthari High Command, intended for the Kathrak Empire. The encryption was military-grade, hidden inside what looked like routine trade data. Sarah's team had only found it by accident, a glitch in the quantum relay that caused a momentary decryption failure. For 3 seconds, the real message had been visible. 3 seconds that changed everything. The Harvest Protocol enters final phase in 72 hours. All species confirm readiness. The humans suspect nothing. Sarah had spent the last week tearing apart every database she could access, legal or otherwise. She had called in favors from assets she had cultivated over the years. She had broken into systems that should have been impossible to breach, and piece by piece she had uncovered the truth that no human was ever meant to know. 203 years ago, long before humanity had developed radio technology, a Lirani exploration vessel had discovered Earth. They had studied humanity from orbit for 6 months, cataloging everything about human biology, psychology, and social structures. Their report to the Galactic Council was clinically precise. Humans were adaptable to almost any environment. Humans bred quickly compared to most galactic species. Humans formed emotional attachments easily, making them controllable through social pressure. Humans were intelligent enough to perform complex tasks, but not intelligent enough to have developed faster-than-light travel on their own. In short, humans were the perfect slave species. The Galactic Council had debated for 3 years. Some species objected on moral grounds. The Lirani themselves voted against the proposal, arguing that enslavement was beneath civilized society, but they were outvoted. 43 species signed the Harvest Protocol. They agreed to wait until humanity reached a certain level of technological development, then make peaceful contact. They would integrate humanity into galactic society, let humans spread across the stars, let them build colonies and infrastructure. They would let humans feel safe and welcomed, and then, when humanity was fully dependent on galactic technology and spread too thin to effectively resist, the Council would activate the harvest. Sarah found the technical specifications for the health monitors that every human had been required to have implanted as a condition of joining galactic society. The Council had claimed the monitors prevented the spread of diseases between species. They had claimed it was for everyone's protection. Billions of humans, including Sarah herself, had accepted the implants without question. The monitors were neural suppressors. When activated, they would target specific regions of the human brain. Aggression would be dampened. Independent thought would become difficult. Humans would remain intelligent and capable, but they would lose the will to resist, the desire to fight back, the spark that made humanity dangerous. They would become compliant, obedient, perfect workers for the menial labor that the advanced species found beneath them. 40 billion humans across hundreds of worlds, all about to be switched off like machines. Sarah's hands shook as she compiled her evidence. Every instinct she had as an intelligence officer told her to verify further, to make absolutely certain before acting. But there was no time for caution. The activation was scheduled to begin in 72 hours. Once it started, there would be no second chances. She thought about her daughter Emma, studying xenobiology at the Mars Academy. Emma loved the Zenthari. She had Xanthari friends. She dreamed of working on a joint research vessel someday, exploring unknown regions of space alongside species from across the galaxy. How would Sarah tell her that it was all a lie? That Emma's friends had always seen her as livestock? Sarah made copies of everything she had found and distributed them across secure networks that she had set up years ago for emergencies she had hoped would never come. Then she recorded a message. Her voice was steady as she spoke, though her heart hammered in her chest. She explained the harvest protocol. She showed the evidence. She revealed the truth about the implants. And then she gave the order that would change human history forever. All Earth Defense Force units, all colonial militias, all independent captains and crews, activate Contingency Omega. We are at war with the Galactic Council. We have been at war since the moment they made contact. We just did not know it yet. She uploaded the message to every communication network humanity had. Within minutes, it would reach every human in the solar system. Within hours, it would reach the furthest colonies. There would be panic. There would be chaos. Some would refuse to believe it. But Sarah had included all the evidence, and humans were good at recognizing patterns once they knew what to look for. The implants were designed to activate simultaneously across all human populations. The Council wanted to switch off humanity's will to resist all at once, before anyone could warn the others. But Sarah had just warned everyone. 40 billion humans now knew what was coming. They had 72 hours to prepare, except the Council had been monitoring human communications. They knew within minutes that their secret was exposed, and they moved up their timeline. Sarah felt it begin as a pressure behind her eyes. The implant in her skull, dormant for 15 years, suddenly activated. Neural signals flooded her brain, trying to suppress her fear, her anger, her will to fight. She gasped and fell to her knees, clutching her head. Around her, other humans on the Unity station did the same. Screams echoed through the corridors as billions of implants activated simultaneously across human space. But something went wrong with the harvest protocol. Human brains were not like other species. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, chasing prey for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them. Human neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to damage, was unprecedented in the galaxy. The Council had studied humanity for 2 centuries, but they had not understood this fundamental truth about human neurology. The implants tried to suppress aggression and independent thought. Instead, they triggered something primal. Sarah felt rage unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was not the hot anger of a moment. It was cold, calculating fury that burned through the neural suppression like acid through paper. Her vision cleared. Her thoughts sharpened. Around her, other humans were rising to their feet, their eyes hard and clear. The implants had failed. Worse than failed. Instead of making humans compliant, the clumsy attempt at neural manipulation had stripped away every civilized restraint. Humanity had spent 50 years playing nice with the galactic community, suppressing the violent instincts that had carried them to the top of Earth's food chain. The Council had just reminded 40 billion humans exactly what they were capable of. Sarah stood and walked to the communication console. Blood ran from her nose where the implant activation had caused some minor damage, but she ignored it. She opened a channel to Earth Defense Command and spoke 4 words that would echo across human space. Release the war fleets. For 15 years, humanity had been building ships in the dark spaces between stars, far from Council monitoring. For 15 years, human scientists had been reverse engineering every piece of alien technology they could access, quietly improving on designs that the Council thought were secret. For 15 years, humanity had been preparing for the day when the galaxy's true intentions became clear. Sarah had hoped that day would never come. She had hoped the conspiracy theorists were wrong, that her own paranoia was unfounded, that the Council truly wanted peace. But intelligence officers did not survive by hoping for the best. They survived by preparing for the worst. The worst had arrived. On Earth, the Secretary General received Sarah's full report within 10 minutes of the activation attempt. She read it once, verified the sources, and then addressed humanity through every available channel. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of steel that made billions of humans stop what they were doing and listen. Citizens of Earth and all human colonies, the Galactic Council has attempted to enslave our species. They have failed. Humanity is many things, but we are not. We have never been and we will never be slaves. Every species on the Galactic Council voted to harvest us. Every species knew. Every species agreed. They smiled to our faces while planning to put chains on our children. This cannot stand. This will not stand. Humanity is now in a state of total war with all Council species. We will accept nothing less than complete surrender or complete destruction of those who sought to enslave us. They wanted workers. They are going to get warriors. They wanted to own us. They are going to learn what humans do to slavers. The message spread across human space like wildfire. On Mars, military units surrounded the Xanthari embassy and arrested every alien inside. On Europa Station, human workers walked off their jobs simultaneously, leaving critical infrastructure in alien hands unmanned. On the colony worlds, humans who had lived peacefully alongside alien neighbors for decades now looked at those neighbors with new eyes. Those aliens had known. All of them had known. The Xanthari ambassador to Earth sent a desperate message to the Council homeworlds. His voice shook as he spoke. They know. The humans know everything. The implants did not work. Request immediate military support. The humans are not becoming compliant. They are becoming something else. Something terrible. But it was too late for warnings. Too late for military support. Too late for anything except what was coming. 10,000 light-years from Earth, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session in their Grand Sanctuary Station. The station was supposed to be impregnable, protected by technology that made faster-than-light weapons impossible to use inside its shields. 147 representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Hall, their voices raised in argument and recrimination. Grand Archon Velthor of the Kithrak Empire called for order. His massive form towered over the other delegates as he spoke. The humans have discovered the protocol earlier than anticipated. This is inconvenient but not catastrophic. They possess no faster-than-light weapons. They cannot reach this station. We have mobilized our fleets. Human space will be locked down within one standard cycle. Yes, they will fight. Yes, we will take casualties. But they are one species against 47. The mathematics are clear. A Lairani delegate stood, her crystalline features reflecting the hall's lights. We warned you this would happen. We told you the humans were too dangerous to enslave. You should have left them alone. Velthor's laugh was a rumbling growl. Your species voted against the protocol out of sentimentality, not wisdom. The humans are angry children locked in a nursery. Let them scream and break their toys. When they exhaust themselves, we will do what we should have done from the beginning. They wanted to be equals. They will learn their place. The debate continued for hours. None of them noticed the faint shimmer in space near the station's outer perimeter. None of them detected the 6 human warships that emerged from quantum space directly inside the sanctuary's defensive shields. Using technology the Council did not know humanity possessed. The human ships did not broadcast warnings or demands. They simply opened fire. The sanctuary station's shields could stop external attacks. They were not designed to stop attacks from inside. Plasma cannons tore through the station's hull. Kinetic penetrators shredded critical systems. And then the human ships released boarding parties. Sarah had wanted to lead the assault herself, but the military command had refused. She was too valuable as the intelligence director. Instead, she watched through live feeds as human soldiers in advanced combat armor moved through the sanctuary station's corridors. The soldiers did not take prisoners. They had their orders. They had their purpose. Every council delegate who had voted for the Harvest Protocol was hunted down and killed. The process was methodical and thorough. Some delegates tried to surrender. Some tried to hide. Some tried to fight. It made no difference. The human soldiers had a list of names, and they worked through that list with cold efficiency. Grand Archon Velthor died in the council hall, still trying to reach his personal shield generator. A human lieutenant shot him twice in the chest and once in the head, then moved on to the next target without pausing. The Xanthari High Command representatives died in their secure bunker. The Kithrak military observers died at their posts. One by one, the delegates who had signed humanity's enslavement warrant were erased. Only one delegate survived. Ambassador Kreth of the Lairani had voted against the protocol. The human soldiers verified his voting record, then escorted him to an escape pod and launched him toward Lairani space. Before they released him, their commander gave him a data chip. Show them what we did here. Show them what happens to slavers. And tell your people that humanity remembers who voted against the protocol. When this is over, we will remember our friends. Kreth took the chip with trembling hands and fled. The human ships departed as quickly as they had arrived, vanishing into quantum space before Council reinforcements could respond. They left the sanctuary station a burning wreck, bodies drifting through its shattered corridors. They left a message broadcasting on all frequencies, repeated in every Council language. You voted to make us slaves. We vote to make you extinct. You have one choice, surrender completely or die completely. You wanted to own us. Now you will learn what humans do to anyone who tries to put us in chains. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning. This is a promise. We are coming for every species that signed the Harvest Protocol. We are coming for your homeworlds. We are coming for your colonies. We are coming for everything you have ever built, and when we are done, the galaxy will remember forever what happens when you threaten humanity. Surrender or die. You have 30 days to decide. The message ended. The human ships were gone. And across the galaxy, 47 species suddenly realized they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. They had tried to enslave the apex predators of Earth. Now those predators were loose, and they were very, very angry. The news from the sanctuary station reached the Kathrak homeworld exactly 4 hours after the attack. High Commander Zreth watched the footage that Ambassador Kreth had brought back, his expression unreadable behind his armored facial plates. He watched human soldiers move through corridors with practiced efficiency. He watched delegates die. He watched the message that humanity had left behind. When the footage ended, he sat in silence for a long moment. His subordinate officer shifted nervously. High Commander, surely this is just posturing. They killed some politicians. This does not change the strategic reality. We have 15 million warships. They have at most a few thousand. The numbers are overwhelming. Zreth turned to look at the younger officer. You are thinking like a Kethrak. The humans are not Kethrak. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. And they just proved they can reach anywhere in the galaxy, bypassing our best defenses, using technology we did not know they possessed. That should terrify you. But High Commander, they are just one species. Just one species, Zreth interrupted, that survived on a death world where everything tried to kill them. Just one species that fought wars among themselves for thousands of years and somehow did not go extinct. Just one species that we tried to enslave, and now they have declared total war on the entire Galactic Council. He stood and walked to the viewing window, looking out at the Kathrak capital city below. Call the fleet admirals. Emergency session. And send a message to the Council Coalition Command. Tell them the Kethrak Empire is mobilizing everything we have. If we are going to fight humanity, we need to crush them quickly, before they fully wake up. But humanity was already awake. Across human space, the transformation was total and immediate. Every human colony shifted from civilian operation to war footing within hours. Factories that had been producing consumer goods retooled to produce weapons and armor. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels began assembling warships. Research stations that had been studying peaceful applications of alien technology turned their focus to weaponization. On Mars, Dr. Elizabeth Rowe stood in her laboratory surrounded by screens showing alien technology schematics. She had spent 20 years studying Xanthari shield generators, trying to understand the principles that made them work. It had been fascinating academic work. Now she had new instructions. Find the weaknesses, find ways to break them, find ways to turn them into weapons. She had discovered something interesting. Xanthari shields operated on a specific frequency that remained constant across their entire fleet. It made their shields incredibly efficient and easy to maintain. It also meant that if you knew the frequency, you could create a resonance cascade that would cause the shields to collapse. Not just one shield, every shield within range. Elizabeth sent her findings to Earth Defense Command with a note. This will work on every Xanthari ship in their fleet simultaneously. Use it wisely. Similar breakthroughs were happening across every human research facility. The alien species had been generous with their technology over the past 50 years, never imagining that humans were studying it, not just to use it, but to understand it completely. Now that understanding was being weaponized. Shield frequencies, engine vulnerabilities, weapon system exploits, communication protocols that could be hijacked. Humans had cataloged everything, and now they were turning that knowledge into an arsenal. The transformation was not just technological, it was social and psychological. Humans who had lived peacefully with alien neighbors suddenly saw those neighbors as enemies, not because the individual aliens had done anything wrong, but because they represented species that had voted to enslave humanity. Every Xanthari shopkeeper, every Kithrak engineer, every alien who had walked human streets and smiled human smiles had known the truth. They had known and said nothing. On Europa Station, tensions exploded into violence. A human worker confronted a Xanthari supervisor who had been his friend for 5 years. "Did you know? When you invited my family to dinner, when you celebrated my daughter's birthday, when we talked about our dreams for the future, did you know?" The Xanthari's silence was answer enough. The human struck without thinking, without hesitation. Other humans joined in. Within minutes, every alien on Europa Station was either dead or fleeing for their lives. Similar incidents erupted across human space. The Galactic Council species had spent 50 years building relationships with humans, never understanding that those relationships were based on a lie. When the lie was revealed, the relationships shattered like glass. Sarah Chen watched the violence reports coming in from across human space with a heavy heart. This was what war did. It took normal people and turned them into killers. It took a peaceful society and transformed it into something cold and hard, but there was no stopping it now. The Council had started this. Humanity would finish it. She reviewed the strategic situation with her command staff. Earth Defense Force Admiral Marcus Hayes spread a holographic display across the conference table, showing the disposition of human forces. "We have 6,000 warships ready for immediate deployment. Another 20,000 in various stages of completion. The Council Coalition is assembling 15 million ships. They outnumber us 2,500 to 1. Conventional warfare is not an option," Sarah said. "We cannot win a fleet-to-fleet engagement with those numbers. We need to think asymmetrically." Admiral Hayes nodded. "Already underway. We have human operatives embedded in every Council species infrastructure. Some are deep cover agents we placed years ago. Most are just civilians who lived and worked alongside aliens, learning their systems from the inside. As of 2 hours ago, all of those operatives received activation codes. They are now saboteurs. The results of that sabotage began appearing within days. On the Kithrak homeworld, the primary power grid failed mysteriously. Investigation revealed that a human engineer who had been working on grid optimization for 3 years had installed subtle backdoors in the control systems. With a single command, he had shut down power to half the planet's military production facilities. On Xanthari Prime, the water purification systems began producing water contaminated with chemicals that were harmless to humans, but toxic to Xanthari biology. Thousands became sick before the source was identified. The human technician who had maintained those systems for 7 years had vanished, leaving behind only a message. "You wanted us as slaves. How does it feel to be helpless?" Across the Council's territory, infrastructure began failing in cascading patterns. Communications networks crashed. Transportation systems stalled. Food production facilities reported mysterious equipment malfunctions. And everywhere the pattern was the same. Humans who had been trusted members of society for years or decades suddenly revealed themselves as agents of Earth. The Council had positioned humans throughout the galaxy to make the harvest easier. Now those positions had become weapons aimed at the heart of galactic civilization. But sabotage was just the beginning. Sarah authorized the deployment of humanity's most terrifying weapon, gray goo nanomachines. The technology had been theoretical when humanity first encountered it in Council databases. Human scientists had made it very real. The nanomachines were microscopic self-replicating robots designed to break down matter at the molecular level and use it to build more nanomachines. Once released, they were almost impossible to stop. They could consume entire ships, entire stations, entire worlds if left unchecked. The Council had banned the technology centuries ago as too dangerous. Humanity had no such restrictions. The first deployment was against a Kithrak supply convoy carrying ammunition and equipment to the front lines. A single human stealth ship approached the convoy, released a canister of nanomachines, and departed. Within 6 hours, the entire convoy had been reduced to clouds of gray dust. 2,000 Kithrak crew members died as the ships literally disintegrated around them. The Council issued desperate warnings about the nanomachine attacks, calling them war crimes against civilized warfare. Humanity's response was broadcast across all channels by Earth Secretary General. You lecture us about civilized warfare? You plan to enslave 40 billion humans. You voted to strip us of our free will and make us your property. Every species in the council knew. Every species agreed. And now you cry about war crimes when we fight back? There are no war crimes when you are fighting slavers. There is only justice. You wanted to harvest us. Now you will be harvested. The message was clear. Humanity was not interested in playing by rules established by the same civilization that had tried to enslave them. This would not be a civilized war with boundaries and restrictions. This would be total war, and humanity would use every weapon at their disposal. The Galactic Council's coalition fleet began its advance toward human space. 15 million warships, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. They moved in coordinated formations, their commanders confident that sheer numbers would overwhelm any resistance. They expected to reach Earth's solar system within 2 standard months. They expected humanity would try to defend their homeworld in one final desperate battle. They were wrong about everything. Humanity had no intention of defending Earth. Instead, Earth was being evacuated. 40 billion people were being moved through a network of quantum wormholes to hidden locations, scattered across unexplored space. The wormhole technology was not supposed to exist. The Council's scientists had proven it was theoretically impossible. Humanity had made it work anyway, partly through human ingenuity and partly through decades of secretly stolen alien research. The evacuation was massive and chaotic, but it was working. Every day, millions of humans disappeared from Earth, from Mars, from the major colonies. They took critical infrastructure and technology with them. They left behind cities and structures, but those were just buildings. The people, the knowledge, the will to fight, all of that was being preserved. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last transport ships depart from Earth orbit. All personnel evacuated, Admiral. Earth is empty except for automated systems. Good, Hayes said quietly. Activate the final protocols. Let us show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home. Earth had been humanity's home for hundreds of thousands of years. Humans had evolved there, built their first civilizations there, reached for the stars from there, and now humanity was turning their homeworld into the largest bomb ever created. For 30 years, human engineers had been secretly hollowing out sections of Earth's mantle and core, replacing rock with antimatter containment fields. The work had been done in absolute secrecy, hidden even from most of humanity. The purpose was simple. If Earth ever faced an existential threat, if humanity ever needed to send a message so powerful that it could never be ignored, Earth itself would become that message. The Council's coalition fleet arrived in the solar system, expecting to find desperate human defenders. Instead, they found empty space. Abandoned stations, silent planets. Mars was evacuated. Jupiter's moons showed no life signs. Earth itself registered no human presence. Grand Admiral Velkoth of the Coalition Fleet studied the sensor readings with growing unease. Where are they? Scan for cloaked ships. Scan for hidden bases. Scan everything. Sir, we are detecting massive energy readings from Earth itself, something in the planet's core. The readings are consistent with antimatter. Velkoth's blood went cold. How much antimatter? Sir, the readings suggest... It's impossible. No one would put that much antimatter in a planet's core. The numbers must be wrong. How much? Enough to shatter the planet and everything within 10 light seconds. Sir, the entire fleet is within range. Velkoth opened his mouth to order an immediate retreat, but he was too late. Deep within Earth's core, automated systems activated. Containment fields that had held back antimatter for 30 years suddenly failed in a precisely choreographed sequence. Matter met antimatter. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Earth's core exploded with the force of 1,000 supernovas compressed into one moment. The planet cracked open like an egg, releasing energy that had been building for 3 decades. The shockwave expanded at relativistic speeds, catching the coalition fleet before they could even begin to run. 15 million warships evaporated in seconds. Crews did not have time to scream. Ships did not have time to activate shields. The outer planets of the solar system were blasted out of their orbits. The sun itself flickered from the electromagnetic pulse. And then slowly the light faded. Where Earth had been, there was now only debris and radiation. Where the greatest fleet in galactic history had been, there was nothing but expanding clouds of plasma. A single automated beacon activated in the debris field, broadcasting on all frequencies. Sarah Chen's voice echoed across the ruins of Earth's solar system. This is Commander Sarah Chen of Earth Intelligence Division. What you have witnessed is the consequence of threatening humanity. You came here to conquer us, to enslave us, to take our home. We have denied you that satisfaction. Earth is gone. The fleet you sent is gone. 15 million ships and their crews have been erased in one moment. This is what humanity does when you threaten us. We do not defend, we erase. We do not negotiate with slavers. We destroy them. You have 26 days remaining to surrender. For every day you delay, another Council homeworld will share Earth's fate. The choice is yours. Surrender or die. There will be no third option. The message repeated endlessly as the debris from Earth and the Coalition fleet continued spreading through the solar system. It was picked up by Council listening posts. It was broadcast across their communication networks. It was played on every screen in every Council world. The galaxy watched in horror as the images spread. Earth had been a beautiful world, the birthplace of a species that had seemed so eager to join galactic civilization. Now it was rubble. 15 million warships, the pride of 47 species, had been reduced to atoms. And humanity's message was clear. We would rather destroy ourselves than let you enslave us. And if you continue this war, we will destroy you too. On the Kithrak homeworld, High Commander Zreth watched the footage in silence. His subordinate officer, the same one who had dismissed humanity's capabilities earlier, stood trembling beside him. High Commander, they destroyed their own homeworld. They sacrificed their own planet just to kill our fleet. What kind of species does that? Zreth continued staring at the screen, watching Earth's death over and over again. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried an edge of something that might have been fear. A species that will win this war, he said, because they are willing to lose everything to do it. The Erasure Doctrine was released exactly 12 hours after Earth's destruction. It was not a long document. Humanity was done with complicated treaties and diplomatic language. The doctrine was 3 pages long and written in simple, direct terms that left no room for misunderstanding. Sarah Chen had written it herself, and every word was chosen to be absolutely clear. Every species that had signed the Harvest Protocol would face one choice: complete unconditional surrender or complete extinction. Complete surrender meant disbanding all military forces. It meant opening all government databases to human inspection. It meant accepting human occupation of key infrastructure. It meant trials for every government official who had participated in planning humanity's enslavement. It meant accepting whatever penalties humanity decided were appropriate. Complete extinction meant exactly what it said. Humanity would erase the species from existence, not just defeat them, not just conquer them. Erase them. Remove every last member of the species from the galaxy until nothing remained but historical records and ruins. There would be no negotiation of terms, no partial surrender, no conditional peace. Each species had 30 days to decide: surrender completely or die completely. Those were the only options. The doctrine ended with a statement that would become infamous across the galaxy. We are not interested in conquest. We are not interested in resources. We are not interested in territory. We are only interested in justice. You voted to enslave us. Now you will pay the price for that vote. This is not revenge. This is proportional response to attempted genocide. You tried to kill humanity as a free species. We will kill those who tried to kill us. This is the only justice that matters. The galactic reaction was immediate and divided. 23 species requested emergency meetings to discuss surrender terms. They were told there were no terms to discuss. Surrender or die. Humanity would not waste time arguing about details. 14 species began evacuating their homeworlds, trying to flee to other galaxies where humanity might not follow. They were wrong about that too. Humanity had spent 50 years learning galactic geography. They knew where every Council species had colonies. They knew the routes ships would take to flee. And they were faster than any Council species had imagined possible. 10 species, led by the Kithrak Empire and the Zenthari Confederation, refused to even consider surrender. They issued defiant statements declaring that they would fight to the last ship. They called humanity's bluff, convinced that no species would actually follow through on total genocide. They believed that humans were still fundamentally decent, that the destruction of Earth was an emotional response that humanity would regret once their anger cooled. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The Kithrak had proposed the Harvest Protocol originally 200 years ago. It had been a Kithrak admiral who first identified humanity as the perfect slave species. Kithrak economic models had calculated how much profit could be made from billions of human workers. Kithrak military planners had designed the implants that would turn humans into obedient servants. The Kithrak had started this. Sarah decided they would be the first example of what happened to species who tried to enslave humanity. Dr. Elizabeth Rowe was given a new assignment. The same woman who had been studying shield technology now turned her attention to biology. Specifically, Kithrak biology. She had access to decades of medical data that the Kithrak had shared during the peaceful years. She had genetic sequences. She had information about their immune systems. She had everything she needed to design something terrible. It took her 8 days to engineer the virus. She called it Reaper K, keeping the designation clinical and unemotional. The virus was elegant in its simplicity. It was designed to target specific genetic markers unique to Kithrak DNA. It would be completely harmless to any other species, but to Kithrak, it would be universally fatal. The virus had a 2-week incubation period during which it would show no symptoms while spreading rapidly through any Kithrak population. After incubation, symptoms would begin: respiratory failure, organ shutdown, brain hemorrhaging. Death would follow within 72 hours of symptom onset. There was no cure because the virus rewrote itself constantly, adapting faster than any treatment could be developed. Elizabeth delivered the virus to Sarah without ceremony. This will work. Once released into their population, every Kithrak in the galaxy will be dead within 6 weeks. All 90 billion of them. Sarah held the container with both hands, feeling the weight of it. Such a small thing to carry genocide. You understand what this is? What we are about to do? Yes, Elizabeth said quietly. We are going to exterminate an entire species. They were going to do worse to us. They voted to strip away our free will, our humanity, everything that makes us who we are. That is a fate worse than death. They chose to be slavers. Now they pay the slaver's price. Sarah loaded the virus into a dozen autonomous drones. The drones were programmed to disperse Reaper K into the atmosphere of every Kithrak world. Every station with significant Kithrak populations. Every ship in their fleet. The drones were undetectable using Council technology. They would complete their mission before anyone knew they existed. She authorized the deployment. The drones launched, and Sarah felt nothing except cold satisfaction. The Kithrak did not notice anything wrong at first. The drones dispersed the virus silently across their worlds. Kithrak citizens went about their daily lives unaware that they were already dead. 2 weeks passed. The virus spread through their population with ruthless efficiency. Every Kithrak who came in contact with an infected individual became infected themselves. The virus traveled on their breath, on their touch, in their very presence. On day 15, the first symptoms appeared. A Kithrak worker on one of their industrial worlds began coughing. Then another, then thousands. Within hours, every hospital on the planet was overwhelmed. Within a day, Kithrak on other worlds began showing symptoms. The pattern was the same everywhere: sudden onset, rapid progression, and inevitable death. Kithrak doctors worked desperately to find a cure. They analyzed the virus and realized what they were facing. This was not a natural disease. This was a weapon designed specifically to kill Kithrak and nothing else. It was a targeted extinction event. High Commander Zareth received the reports in his command center. He listened as medical officials explained that they had no cure, no treatment, no way to stop the virus. He listened as population estimates were revised downward. 90 billion Kithrak, then 80 billion as deaths mounted, then 70 billion. He opened a communication channel to Sarah Chen. Her face appeared on his screen, calm and composed. Commander Chen, you have released a biological weapon on my people. This is a war crime by any definition. You plan to enslave 40 billion humans, Sarah replied evenly. You designed neural implants to strip away our free will. You wanted to reduce us to property. And you dare talk to me about war crimes? No, High Commander. There are no war crimes when fighting slavers. There is only justice. We will find a cure. We will survive this. You will not. The virus was designed to adapt faster than any cure can be developed. Every Kithrak in the galaxy will be dead in 3 weeks. Your species voted to end humanity's freedom. Humanity has voted to end your species. This is proportional response. My people had families, children, innocents who never voted for anything. Sarah's expression hardened. So did we. Every human you planned to enslave had families, had children, had dreams and hopes and futures you wanted to take away. Where was your mercy then? Where was your concern for innocence when you planned to turn our children into slaves? You started this war. We are finishing it. Zreth tried to speak, but his voice failed. The cough had started in his throat. He looked down at his hands and saw the first signs of hemorrhaging. He was infected. They all were. 21 days, Sarah said softly. That is how long it took from release to complete extinction. 90 billion Kithrak are gone. The Council has 21 days remaining to surrender. For every day you delay, we will select another species. The choice is yours. She closed the connection. Zreth sat alone in his command center, feeling his body beginning to fail. Around him, his homeworld was dying. Across the galaxy, every Kithrak world was experiencing the same collapse. No cure would be found. No escape would be possible. The Kithrak had been the second oldest species in the Council, with a civilization spanning 12,000 years. In 3 weeks, they were extinct. Humanity broadcast footage of the Kithrak extinction across all Council networks. They showed the empty cities, the silent shipyards, the massive funeral pyres where billions of bodies were being burned because there was no one left to bury them properly. And over the images, Sarah's voice delivered the message. The Kithrak proposed the Harvest Protocol. They designed the system that would have enslaved humanity. They are the first to pay the price for that decision. 1 species down, 46 remain. Surrender or share their fate. You have 20 days. The reaction across Council space was panic. Species that had been defiant suddenly reconsidered. The Kithrak had been one of the most powerful militaries in the galaxy. If humanity could erase them in 3 weeks, what chance did anyone else have? 13 species surrendered within 48 hours. They opened their databases, disbanded their militaries, and accepted human occupation forces. They cooperated with war crimes tribunals that would determine which individuals had actively promoted the Harvest Protocol. Those individuals were arrested and imprisoned to await trial. The surrendering species were treated with cold efficiency, but not cruelty. Humanity was not interested in punishing species that admitted their guilt and accepted responsibility. But the Zenthari Confederation remained defiant. They had been humanity's closest allies during the peaceful years. Zenthari and humans had worked together on countless projects. The Zenthari had been the first species to welcome humans to the galactic community. That made their betrayal cut deepest, and that made them humanity's second target. The Zenthari did not fight conventionally. They were not warriors like the Kithrak. They were traders and diplomats. But they were clever and they had resources. When they realized humanity would not forgive them, they began evacuating their population. Zenthari ships fled in every direction, trying to scatter across the galaxy so humanity could not track them all. Admiral Hayes authorized Operation Distant Thunder in response. Every Zenthari ship that had fled was tracked using quantum beacons that human operatives had secretly attached to their vessels during the peaceful years. Humanity had been preparing for this war for 15 years. They had prepared for everything. Human hunter groups pursued the Zenthari across the galaxy. It was not a battle. It was an extermination. Zenthari ships were not warships. They were cargo vessels and passenger liners converted for evacuation. They had no chance against human warships designed for one purpose: killing as efficiently as possible. The hunts lasted 6 months. Every Zenthari ship was found and destroyed. 23 billion Zenthari died in the black between stars, their ships torn apart by human weapons. The few who tried to surrender were ignored. The Zenthari had voted for the Harvest Protocol. They had smiled to human faces while planning human enslavement. There would be no mercy for them. Sarah watched the final Zenthari ship die on her tactical display. It had been a civilian transport carrying 5,000 refugees. A single human destroyer had intercepted it at the edge of unexplored space. The Zenthari captain had broadcast desperate pleas for mercy, claiming they had children aboard, claiming they had never supported the Harvest Protocol personally. The destroyer's captain had responded with 4 words: "You voted for slavery." Then the destroyer had opened fire. Sarah felt something crack inside her as she watched. These were not soldiers. These were civilians. Yes, their government had voted to enslave humanity. Yes, their species had participated in the plot. But did every single Zenthari deserve death? Did the children aboard that ship deserve to die for their government's crimes? She pushed the thoughts away. This was war. This was justice. This was what happened when you tried to enslave humanity. You did not get to cry about collateral damage after you planned to strip away the free will of 40 billion humans. You did not get to appeal to mercy when you showed none. But the thoughts kept coming back. Late at night, in the quiet moments between strategic planning sessions, Sarah would think about the Zenthari children. She would think about the Cuthrak families dying from Reaper K. She would think about Earth, destroyed to kill an enemy fleet. She would think about what humanity was becoming. 14 more species surrendered after the Zenthari extinction. The Council was fracturing. Species that had been allies for centuries now looked at each other with suspicion. Some blamed the Cuthrak for proposing the Harvest Protocol. Some blamed the Zenthari for supporting it. Some blamed themselves for not having the courage to vote against it. But 10 species remained defiant. They formed an alliance called the Final Coalition. They swore they would never surrender to humanity. They believed they could still win if they worked together. They fortified their homeworlds. They mobilized their remaining fleets. They prepared for humanity's assault. The Velkun were the strongest species in the Final Coalition. They were an ancient warrior race whose civilization predated most Council species by millions of years. Their homeworld was protected by technology so advanced that even other Council species did not fully understand it. Defensive systems that had stood for eons, shields that had never been breached, weapons that could destroy continents with a single shot. The Velkun believed they were invincible. They sent a message to humanity: we will not surrender. We cannot be conquered. Come and die on our shields if you dare. Admiral Hayes studied the Velkun defenses for 3 days. Then he called Sarah. We cannot take their homeworld by conventional assault. Their defenses are too strong. We would lose millions of soldiers and still fail. I need authorization for Starfall Protocol. Sarah knew what that meant. Starfall Protocol was the ultimate weapon in humanity's arsenal. It was so extreme that even the military commanders were reluctant to use it. You want to collapse their star? It is the only way. Their defenses can stop ships. They cannot stop a black hole. That will destroy their entire solar system. 8 planets. Hundreds of stations. 50 billion Velkun. They chose not to surrender. This is the consequence of that choice. Sarah thought about the Zenthari children. She thought about the Cuthrak dying from the virus. She thought about Earth destroyed by human hands to deny it to the enemy. She thought about what humanity had become. What she had become, and she authorized Starfall Protocol. The Velkun had no warning. A single human ship entered their system and moved toward their star. Velkun defenders intercepted it, destroying the ship easily. But the ship had accomplished its mission. Before dying, it had deployed a device into the star's core. A device that humanity had spent 10 years developing. A device that could trigger a forced stellar collapse. The Velkun star began dying. Nuclear fusion became unstable. The stellar core compressed under its own gravity. Within 6 hours, the star collapsed into a black hole. The black hole immediately began consuming everything in the system. Planets were torn apart by tidal forces. Stations were crushed and shredded. The Velkun homeworld, protected by technology millions of years old, lasted longer than the others but still fell into the black hole eventually. 50 billion Velkun died as their entire solar system was erased. Not killed in battle, just erased from existence, crushed into a singularity that would persist for trillions of years. The Velkun had been one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Now they were gone, and only a black hole marked where they had been. Humanity broadcast the footage across the galaxy. The message was simple. 3 species have refused to surrender and have been erased. 7 species remain in the Final Coalition. Surrender now or share their fate. The Final Coalition fractured. 5 species surrendered within hours. They could not fight an enemy willing to destroy entire solar systems. The remaining 2 species, the Dreth and the Xylar, tried to flee the galaxy entirely. Human ships pursued them into intergalactic space. The hunt lasted 2 months. Both species were eventually cornered and exterminated. The war had lasted 3 years. Humanity had destroyed 5 species completely. 29 more had surrendered unconditionally. 13 had been attempting to flee when they were caught and offered surrender at the last moment, which was accepted. Of the original 47 Council species, 31 were completely extinct. The galaxy would never be the same. Sarah stood in front of the memorial wall that had been constructed in humanity's new capital. The wall contained names of every human who had died in the war. 5 billion names. She traced her fingers over some of them, reading the names of people she had known. Friends. Colleagues. Her own daughter's name was on the wall. Emma had died in the early days, killed when the Zenthari had counterattacked against Mars Colony. Sarah had authorized the Zenthari extinction, knowing her daughter's killers were among them. She had done it without hesitation. And now she stood before her daughter's name and wondered if Emma would have wanted this. Would have wanted entire species erased in her name. Behind her, Admiral Hayes approached quietly. The tribunals are ready to begin. The council leaders who promoted the Harvest Protocol will stand trial. Good, Sarah said without turning. They wanted to enslave us. They will face justice for that. Actual justice this time, not just execution. Some people are calling us monsters, Hayes said. They say we went too far, that we became worse than the council ever was. Sarah finally turned to face him. We stopped a genocide. The council planned to enslave 40 billion humans. That is genocide, not killing bodies, but killing minds, killing freedom, killing everything that makes a person an individual. We stopped that. Yes, we paid a terrible price. Yes, we did terrible things, but we stopped them. That is all that matters. Is it? Hayes asked quietly. I look at what we have done and I wonder if we have lost something. Something important. Something that made us human. Sarah had no answer for that. She turned back to the memorial wall to her daughter's name. Emma had believed in peace, in cooperation, in the dream of different species working together. That dream had died with her and with billions of others. The galaxy had learned what happened when you threatened humanity. It had learned at the cost of 31 extinct species and trillions of dead. Humanity had won. But Hayes was right. They had lost something in the winning, something that could never be recovered. Ambassador Kreth of the Lirani stood before the Human Council in the new capital, his crystalline form reflecting the harsh lights of the chamber. He was one of the few alien representatives still allowed to move freely in human space. His species had voted against the Harvest Protocol. That vote had saved them from extinction, but it had not saved them from witnessing what humanity had become. I come with a message from the 16 surviving council species, Kreth said, his voice carrying the musical tones of his language translated into human speech. We beg you to stop. 31 species have been destroyed. The galaxy is broken. There is no more council, no more threat to humanity. The war is over. Please, let it end. Sarah Chen sat at the center of the council chamber, looking older than her years. 3 years of total war had aged everyone who survived it. The war is not over until every species that voted for our enslavement has faced justice. There are still trials to complete, still individuals who planned the Harvest Protocol who have not been found. You hunt them across the galaxy like animals, Kreth said, and there was anger in his voice now. You have destroyed civilizations for the crimes of their leaders. You have become the very thing you fought against. We became what we needed to become to survive, Sarah replied. If that makes us monsters, then so be it. At least we are free monsters, not slaves. Kreth was silent for a moment. Then he spoke more softly. I knew your daughter, Commander Chen. Emma and I worked together on the Mars Xenobiology project. She spoke often about her hope for true peace between species. She believed that understanding and cooperation were possible. What would she think of what you have done in her name? Sarah's expression did not change, but her hands clenched the armrests of her chair hard enough that her knuckles went white. My daughter is dead because the species she trusted, the species she worked alongside, the species she considered friends, were planning to enslave her all along. She died believing in a lie. I will not dishonor her memory by allowing that lie to continue. So you honor her by destroying the very peace she dreamed of? I honor her by ensuring no other child will ever face what she faced. No other species will ever again have the power to threaten humanity. That is the only peace that matters. Kreth bowed his head. He had known this meeting would accomplish nothing, but he had to try. Then I will deliver your message to my people. The hunts will continue. The trials will continue. The galaxy will remain broken until humanity decides it has had enough revenge. This is not revenge, Sarah said quietly. This is justice. There is a difference. Is there? Kreth asked. I wonder if you still know the difference, Commander. He left without waiting for a response. Sarah sat alone in the chamber after he departed, thinking about his words. Thinking about her daughter. Thinking about the 31 extinct species and the trillions of dead. Thinking about whether any of it had been worth it. The war crimes tribunals continued across human-controlled space. Council officials who had participated in planning the harvest protocol were brought before human judges. The trials were scrupulously fair, with evidence presented and defenses allowed. But the outcomes were rarely in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming. Most defendants were found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment on harsh penal colonies established specifically for this purpose. But not everyone in humanity was satisfied with imprisonment. There was a growing movement calling for harsher punishments. They had suffered through 3 years of brutal war. They had lost Earth itself. They had watched 5 billion humans die. And now they were expected to simply lock up the people responsible and call it justice? Major groups began forming in human space. The largest was called the Final Solution Movement. Their message was simple. Every alien who had participated in planning human enslavement should be executed. Not imprisoned, executed. And every surviving species should be reduced to pre-industrial technology and confined to their homeworlds under permanent human monitoring. Never again should aliens have the capability to threaten humanity. The movement gained support rapidly, especially among veterans and those who had lost family in the war. Admiral Hayes himself became a vocal supporter. He argued that mercy toward enemies who had shown no mercy was foolishness. He argued that humanity had been too soft, too willing to accept surrender, too quick to stop the exterminations once species surrendered. Sarah found herself leading the opposite faction. She believed the war had gone far enough. She believed continued violence would only transform humanity into something unrecognizable, but she was losing support. The people were angry, traumatized, and they wanted blood. Simple imprisonment felt insufficient after everything they had suffered. The debate came to a head over what to do with the Draxian Imperium. The Draxians had surrendered early in the war and cooperated fully with human authorities. They had opened their databases, revealing exactly who in their government had voted for the Harvest Protocol. Those individuals had been arrested and tried. The Draxian population had been peaceful and compliant. But the Final Solution movement was not satisfied. They pointed out that the Draxian government had unanimously supported the Harvest Protocol. Every Draxian politician had voted yes. The population had supported their government. This made every Draxian complicit in attempted genocide. The movement demanded that the Draxian Imperium be exterminated like the Cathrak and Zenthari had been. Sarah stood before the Human Council and argued against it. The Draxians surrendered. They cooperated. They have accepted our terms and our justice. If we exterminate them now, after they surrendered, we are no longer fighting a war. We are simply committing genocide. That makes us the monsters they claimed we would become. Admiral Hayes responded from his position in the military section. They voted to enslave us, all of them. Their entire civilization agreed that humanity should be reduced to property. Why should they escape the consequences of that vote? The Kithrak voted for slavery and died. The Zenthari voted for slavery and died. The Draxians voted for slavery and should die too. Consistency demands it. Consistency would make us mass murderers. Sarah shot back. We accepted their surrender. We gave them terms. They met those terms. If we kill them anyway, what message does that send? That surrender is meaningless? That cooperation will not save you? That humanity cannot be trusted to keep its word? The message it sends, Hayes said coldly, is that if you vote to enslave humanity, you will die. No exceptions. No forgiveness. No mercy. That is the message that will keep us safe. The debate raged for weeks. Public opinion was sharply divided. Younger humans, those who had not lived through the peaceful years before the war, strongly supported the Final Solution movement. They had grown up knowing only that aliens had tried to enslave humanity. They had no memory of cooperation or friendship with other species. To them, all aliens were potential threats that needed to be controlled or eliminated. Older humans were more divided. Some remembered the peaceful years and mourned what had been lost. Others felt betrayed by those memories, angry at themselves for having been deceived. The whole galaxy had been lying to them, and they had believed the lies. That made the betrayal cut deeper. While humanity debated its own soul, the surviving alien species watched in growing horror. They saw the final solution movement gaining power. They saw human warships maintaining positions near their homeworlds, ready to strike if ordered. They understood that their continued existence depended on human internal politics, and those politics were unstable. Some species began preparing for the worst. They built hidden shelters deep underground. They sent small groups of their population to secret colonies far from their homeworlds, trying to preserve their species if the worst happened. They lived in constant fear, waiting for humanity to decide whether they would be allowed to live. The Lyrani ambassador Kreth sent desperate messages to Sarah. You must stop this movement. You must convince your people that continued genocide is not the answer. If you exterminate the Draxians after they surrendered, the other species will never trust human promises again. You will force them to fight because surrender will be meaningless. You will create the very conflict you claim to want to prevent. Sarah knew he was right, but she also knew she was losing control. The war had unleashed something in humanity, something dark and primal that had been buried under civilization's surface. The betrayal had been too complete, too devastating. Humans had trusted the Council absolutely, and that trust had been weaponized against them. Now humans would never trust again, and without trust there could be no peace, only dominance or destruction. The vote on the Draxian question approached. Sarah worked tirelessly to build support for Mercy, calling in every favor, making every argument she could think of. But the final solution movement was well organized and well funded. Admiral Hayes had thrown the military support behind them, and the military had enormous influence after winning the war. 2 days before the vote, Sarah received a message that changed everything. It was from a Lyrani historian named Kelvos, someone she had never heard of before. The message was marked urgent and eyes only. Commander Chen, I have discovered information that you need to see. Information about the Harvest Protocol's true history. Meet me at the coordinates below. Come alone. If I am right about what I have found, it will change everything. Sarah should have been suspicious, should have brought security, should have verified the message's authenticity, but she was desperate for anything that might shift the political situation. She went alone to the coordinates, an abandoned orbital station in neutral space. Kelvos was waiting for her in the station's data archives. He was old for a Lyrani, his crystalline form dimmed with age. He moved slowly among the ancient data storage units, pulling up files that were centuries old. I have spent 3 years researching the Harvest Protocol's origins, Kelvos explained, trying to understand how the Council could have made such a decision. What I found disturbs me greatly. Commander Chen, not all species voted for the protocol willingly. He displayed a document on the screen. It was marked with Council security classifications that should have made it impossible to access. This is the original Council meeting minutes from 203 years ago, when the Harvest Protocol was proposed. The official record shows that 43 species voted yes with only 4 voting no. But this is the real record, the one that was sealed and hidden. Sarah read through the document, her expression growing darker with each line. The real record told a very different story. Only 12 species had actively supported the Harvest Protocol. They were the most powerful and militarily dominant species in the Council at the time: the Cathrak, Zenthari, Velkun, and 9 others. These 12 had not just proposed the protocol, they had threatened the other Council species. Any species that voted against the protocol would be expelled from the Council. They would lose access to trade routes. They would lose military protection. They would be isolated and vulnerable. For smaller, weaker species, this was a death sentence. They needed the Council to survive. So they voted yes, even though many of them opposed enslavement morally. The Draxians were among those coerced. Their internal government records, also included in Kelvos's files, showed heated debate. Many Draxian politicians had argued passionately against the protocol, but their military advisors had explained the reality. Vote yes or face expulsion and possible conquest by the species who wanted the protocol. The Draxians had chosen survival, They had voted yes. 8 species were coerced into voting yes, Kelvos explained. Another 17 went along because they were afraid to stand against the dominant powers. They did not actively support enslavement. They simply lacked the courage to resist. Only 12 species truly wanted to enslave humanity. You have already destroyed 9 of those 12. The other 3 surrendered early and their leaders are imprisoned. The species you are currently debating whether to exterminate were victims of the same coercion humanity faced. Sarah felt the weight of this information crushing down on her. Why are you showing me this? Why not release it publicly? Because I am afraid, Kelvos said simply. If I release this, some in the final solution movement will not care. They will say it does not matter, that the species voted yes regardless of their reasons, that they are still guilty, and I fear they may target my species in retaliation for revealing this information. You have the power to control how this information is used. I do not. Sarah studied the old historian for a long moment. You could have hidden this, kept it secret. Your own species voted no. You were not coerced. You could have let us destroy the Draxians and the others, and it would not have affected the Lirani at all. I could have, Kelvos agreed. But I have watched humanity destroy 31 species. I have watched you become something terrible in your quest for justice. If I stayed silent now, knowing that your justice was being directed at victims rather than perpetrators, I would be as guilty as those who stayed silent about the Harvest Protocol. I will not make that mistake. Sarah took copies of all the files. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She clasped Kelvos's crystalline hand in both of hers. Thank you, truly. You may have just saved humanity from ourselves. She returned to human space with the files and immediately called an emergency session of the Human Council. She presented Kelvos's evidence publicly, broadcasting it across all human networks. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some humans saw it as vindication that not all species were equally guilty. The Draxians and others who had been coerced deserved mercy, not extinction. These species had been trapped in an impossible situation, just as humanity had been, but others saw it differently. The final solution movement's leadership argued that it did not matter. Coerced or not, the species had voted yes. They had participated in planning humanity's enslavement. The intent to enslave was just as real whether it came from enthusiasm or fear. And fear of consequences was not an excuse for attempting genocide. Admiral Hayes stood before the council and made his position clear. They had a choice. They could have voted no and faced expulsion from the council. Yes, that would have been hard. Yes, they might have suffered. But they chose their own survival over our freedom. They chose to participate in our enslavement rather than stand on principle. That choice makes them guilty. Perhaps not as guilty as the Kithrak or Zinthari, but guilty nonetheless. Sarah countered him. If we execute species for lacking the courage to resist tyranny, what does that make us? They were afraid. They made the wrong choice out of fear. But making the wrong choice out of fear is not the same as making the wrong choice out of malice. There must be degrees of guilt. There must be room for mercy. Mercy for them means risk for us, Hayes replied. Every species we allow to survive is a potential future threat. Our children, our grandchildren, they will face the consequences if we show mercy now. And these species betray us again later. I will not gamble with humanity's future out of misplaced compassion. The debate consumed human space for months. Families divided over it. Friend turned against friends. The question of what justice meant, what humanity meant, what price was too high for security, all of it became a wound that tore through human civilization. And while humanity debated, the 16 surviving alien species waited in fear for a decision that would determine whether they lived or died. They had survived humanity's fury. Now they had to survive humanity's doubt about its own soul. The vote on the Draxian question finally came. The Human Council chamber was packed with observers. Sarah and Hayes had both made their final arguments. Now it came down to the vote. The results were close. 51% voted to spare the Draxians and other coerced species. 49% voted for their extinction. Humanity had decided on mercy by the narrowest of margins. The final solution movement did not accept the result. Admiral Hayes stood and addressed the council with barely controlled rage. You have made a mistake that our descendants will pay for. You have chosen the feelings of today over the safety of tomorrow. I will not be part of this. The military stands ready to protect humanity from all threats, foreign and domestic. If this council will not do what is necessary, perhaps it is time for new leadership. It was the closest thing to a threat of coup that had been spoken openly in human space. Security forces moved to intervene, but Hayes left the chamber peacefully, followed by a significant number of military officers. The split in humanity was now complete. There were those who believed the war should end, and those who believed it had not gone far enough. And the two sides were starting to look at each other as enemies. Sarah stood alone at the chamber's center after Hayes and his supporters left. She had won the vote. She had saved the Draxians and the other coerced species, but she had also fractured humanity in the process. The unity that had carried them through 3 years of brutal war was breaking down, and she had no idea how to put it back together. The Civil War started with a single shot fired in orbit above New Geneva. A military cruiser loyal to Admiral Hayes refused to stand down when ordered by Council security forces. When security vessels moved to intercept, the cruiser opened fire. 3 security ships were destroyed in the opening salvo. The cruiser then broadcast a message across all military channels. The Council has betrayed humanity's security. The military will do what the politicians will not. Join us. 20% of the human military defected to Hayes within the first day. They called themselves the Purity Fleet, and their message was simple: finish what the war started. Exterminate the remaining alien species. Ensure humanity's absolute dominance of the galaxy. Never again trust anyone who was not human. Never again show mercy to those who had shown none. Sarah watched the defection reports coming in with a sinking feeling. She had known Hayes was angry. She had known the Final Solution movement was powerful. But she had not expected this. She had not expected humans to start killing other humans over the question of how many aliens to exterminate. The fighting was brief, but brutal. The Purity Fleet was outnumbered 3-1, but they had some of humanity's most experienced combat veterans. They had ships and weapons that had been designed to fight the Council's advanced technology. Using those weapons against other humans was devastatingly effective. The battle for New Geneva lasted 6 hours. The Council's security forces eventually prevailed, but at terrible cost. 5,000 humans died. An entire orbital sector was left in ruins, and Admiral Hayes escaped with the core of his fleet, disappearing into the uncharted regions where humanity had hidden their populations during the war. Sarah addressed humanity from the rebuilt Council chamber. Behind her, through the windows, rescue crews were still searching the orbital wreckage for survivors. We have just fought our first battle against other humans since we united to face the Council's betrayal. Brothers and sisters have killed each other over the question of whether to show mercy to defeated enemies. This cannot continue. We cannot allow ourselves to fracture like this. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I understand the anger that drives the Purity Fleet. I share that anger. The Council species betrayed us in the worst way possible. They plan to strip away our free will to make us slaves. That crime can never be forgiven. But 31 species have already paid with their existence. Trillions of beings are dead. At some point, we must ask ourselves, how much blood is enough? How much death makes us secure? How much genocide makes us safe? The broadcast reached every human settlement across known space. Some agreed with her. Others did not. In the uncharted regions, Admiral Hayes prepared his own response. Commander Chen speaks of mercy and restraint. She speaks as if the war is over. But the war will never be over as long as species that voted to enslave us still exist. Every day we show mercy is another day those species have to rebuild, to plot, to prepare for the next attempt. And there will be a next attempt. That is the nature of power. The strong dominate or are dominated. There is no third option. Hayes had seized control of several colony worlds in the uncharted regions, worlds that had been established as refugees during the war. He had millions of supporters, people who believed as he did that mercy was weakness and survival required absolute dominance. He began building his forces, preparing for a campaign that would finish what the war started. But before Hayes could launch his campaign, something unexpected happened. Sarah discovered the truth about her daughter's death, and that truth changed everything. Emma Chen had died in the Zenthari counterattack on Mars colony early in the war. Sarah had been told that Emma died instantly when a Zenthari missile struck the research facility where she worked. Sarah had carried that pain through 3 years of war, had authorized the Zenthari extinction, partly in revenge for her daughter, had stood at the memorial wall reading Emma's name and wondering if her daughter would approve of what humanity had become. Now Sarah learned the truth. Emma had not died in the attack. She had survived the initial strike. She had been among the wounded evacuated to a secure medical facility, and she had been deliberately killed by human soldiers 3 days later. The soldiers had been part of an extremist cell that believed any human who worked closely with aliens was a collaborator. They had gone through the medical facility systematically, executing anyone who had alien friends or colleagues. Emma had been killed not by the Zenthari but by her own species, by humans who believed that cooperation with aliens made her a traitor. The soldiers had been caught and court-martialed. The military had kept the details classified to avoid damaging morale during the war. Sarah had never been told. She had spent 3 years believing the Zenthari killed her daughter. She had authorized genocide partly based on that belief, and it had been a lie. Sarah sat alone in her office, staring at the classified report. Her hands shook as she read the names of the soldiers who had killed Emma. They had all died later in the war, killed in various battles. Justice had been served in a way, though not the way Sarah would have chosen. But that hardly mattered now. What mattered was that Sarah had based her entire understanding of the war on false information. She had thought she was avenging her daughter. Instead, she had been avenging nothing. The Zenthari had not killed Emma. Humans had. Humans who thought exactly like Admiral Hayes in the Purity Fleet. Humans who believed that anyone not sufficiently hostile to aliens was an enemy. Sarah broadcast an emergency message to all human space. She revealed the truth about Emma's death. She explained how she had been deceived, how her rage had been misdirected, how her desire for revenge had blinded her to the real danger. The danger was not from aliens who had surrendered and accepted punishment for their crimes. The danger was from humans who could not stop killing, who saw enemies everywhere, who had become so consumed by hate that they murdered their own people. "I have spent 3 years believing I was fighting for justice," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I believed I was honoring my daughter's memory. But Emma died because some humans could not accept that she worked with aliens, that she believed in cooperation and understanding. She died because extremists decided she was a traitor for having alien friends. And I did not know. I authorized the extinction of the Zenthari species partly to avenge a daughter who was not killed by the Zenthari at all." She paused, wiping tears from her face. "We have become what we feared. We have become slavers in our own way, enslaving ourselves to hate and rage. We have destroyed 31 species, killed trillions of beings, shattered the galaxy, and for what? Security? Justice? Or just revenge dressed up in righteous language?" The broadcast continued. "Admiral Hayes and the Purity Fleet believe we must exterminate the remaining species to be safe. But we will never be safe as long as we are willing to kill anyone who disagrees with us. We will never be secure as long as we see enemies everywhere. We will never have peace as long as we cannot accept that the war is over. The species that truly wanted to enslave us are dead or imprisoned. The ones that remain were coerced, were afraid, were trapped. They surrendered. They cooperated. They accepted our justice. If we kill them anyway, we are not protecting humanity. We are destroying it." The reaction to Sarah's broadcast was immediate and explosive. Many humans, especially those who had lost family in the war, felt betrayed. They had believed they were fighting for Emma Chen's memory just as Sarah had been. Now they learned that Emma's death was more complicated, that the neat narrative of human good versus alien evil was not so neat after all. Others felt vindicated. They had argued all along that continued violence was wrong, that mercy was necessary, that humanity needed to stop before it lost itself completely. Sarah's revelation proved them right. But the most important reaction came from Admiral Hayes. He responded to Sarah's broadcast with one of his own. His voice was cold and controlled, showing none of the emotion that had driven him before. "Commander Chen's personal tragedy does not change the strategic reality. Her daughter was killed by extremists, yes, but those extremists existed because the aliens had betrayed us so completely that some humans could not distinguish between aliens and their collaborators. The real blame still lies with the council species who created this situation. If they had not planned to enslave us, none of this would have happened. Commander Chen wants us to show mercy because she feels guilt about her own actions. That is understandable. But it is also dangerous. We cannot allow personal guilt to dictate species survival strategy." Hayes continued. "I am recalling the Purity Fleet to negotiate a settlement with the council government. We have been fighting each other when we should be completing our mission. I propose a compromise. The species that were coerced will be spared extinction, but they will be reduced to pre-industrial technology and confined to their homeworlds under permanent monitoring. They will never again have the capability to threaten humanity. This is justice without genocide. This is security without mercy. This is what survival requires. Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to reject any compromise with Hayes. But she was pragmatic enough to recognize reality. The Purity Fleet controlled significant military assets and had support from a large portion of the human population. Fighting a prolonged civil war would kill millions more humans and accomplish nothing. And Hayes's proposal, while harsh, was not genocide. The alien species would survive even if in diminished form. The negotiations took 3 months. Sarah and Hayes met face to face for the first time since the Civil War began. They sat across from each other in a neutral station, both flanked by advisors and security, both exhausted from years of conflict. "I did not want this," Hayes said without preamble. "I wanted to serve humanity, to protect us. Everything I have done has been for that purpose." "I know," Sarah replied. "I wanted the same thing. We just disagree about what protection means. You think I am a monster, someone who went too far, who became the enemy we were fighting. Sometimes I think we are both monsters. We destroyed 31 species, killed trillions, shattered the galaxy. That is not something normal people do, Marcus. That is not something good people do." Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "My family was on Earth when it was destroyed. My wife, my children, my grandchildren. They evacuated, but one of the transports was damaged. It could not make the quantum jump. They were still in the solar system when Earth detonated. The shockwave destroyed their transport. Everyone aboard died. So when you talk about the price we have paid, I know exactly what it cost." Sarah had not known. She looked at Hayes with new understanding. They had both lost children to this war. They had both made decisions based on that loss. They had both tried to make the pain mean something by turning it into purpose. "I am sorry," Sarah said quietly. "I did not know. It does not change anything. But I want you to understand why I cannot stop. Why I will never stop. Because if we show weakness now, if we let our enemies survive strong enough to threaten us again, then my family died for nothing. Your daughter died for nothing. All of it was meaningless. I cannot accept that. But Marcus, at some point we have to stop. At some point the killing has to end. Or we become nothing but killers, and everything we fought for is lost anyway." They negotiated for weeks, neither willing to compromise completely, both knowing that failure would mean more human deaths in a civil war neither wanted. Finally, they reached an agreement. The 16 surviving species would not be exterminated. They would be allowed to keep their populations and their cultures. But their technology would be restricted to pre-industrial levels. They would be confined to their homeworlds with human monitoring stations in orbit. Any attempt to develop advanced technology would be met with immediate intervention. The restrictions would remain in place for 100 years, at which point humanity would reassess based on behavior and compliance. It was not the mercy Sarah wanted to show. It was not the complete dominance Hayes wanted to impose. It was a compromise that left neither side happy, but that both could accept. The agreement was presented to the surviving alien species. They had no real choice but to accept. The alternative was extermination, or continued human civil war that might end with the extremists winning. They agreed to the terms. The Draxian ambassador, a dignified elderly female who had survived 3 years of war and the threat of extinction, spoke for all the surviving species. "We accept your terms. We will comply with all restrictions. We will prove that we can be trusted, even if it takes 100 years. Thank you for allowing us to live even in this diminished form." Sarah felt no triumph in the alien's gratitude, only exhaustion and something that might have been shame. They had won. Humanity had survived the Council's betrayal. But the victory felt hollow. The War Crimes Tribunals concluded with sentences for the Council leaders who had actively promoted the Harvest Protocol. Most received life imprisonment. Some received death sentences that were carried out publicly. The executions were broadcast across the galaxy as a warning. This is what happens to slavers. This is what happens to those who try to take freedom from others. But the executions brought no satisfaction. The people who watched them felt empty. Killing the guilty did not bring back the dead, did not restore Earth, did not heal the wounds that 3 years of total war had carved into human civilization. 100 years passed. Humanity monitored the surviving species carefully, watching for any sign of betrayal or preparation for war. The species remained compliant. They rebuilt their civilizations within the restrictions imposed on them. They did not love humanity, but they respected human power and human willingness to use that power without restraint. New species eventually emerged in unexplored regions of the galaxy, civilizations that had never been part of the Council, that had never known about the Harvest Protocol.
Humanity made contact with these species cautiously, always watching for signs of threat.
Always prepared to respond with overwhelming force if necessary. The new species were taught one lesson above all others: never threaten humanity. Never attempt to control them, dominate them, or limit their freedom in any way. The species called human had destroyed 31 civilizations for attempting to enslave them. They had sacrificed their own homeworld rather than surrender. They had fought a civil war over the question of how much violence was necessary for security. They were the galaxy's apex predators, and they would respond to any threat with total, uncompromising fury. Humanity's reputation spread across the galaxy. They were known as the Breakers, the species that had shattered the old galactic order. They were feared universally. Some species respected them for their strength. Others hated them for their violence. But all species understood that humanity could never be threatened, never be controlled, never be enslaved. The cost of trying was extinction. Sarah Chen lived to see humanity's reputation solidify across the galaxy. She served as the leader of the Human Council for 40 years after the war ended. She oversaw the rebuilding of human civilization, the establishment of new colonies, the monitoring of restricted species, and the contact with new civilizations. She became one of the most famous humans in history, the woman who had led humanity through its darkest hour, but she never felt like a hero. She felt like someone who had done terrible things for necessary reasons, and she was never quite sure if the reasons had been as necessary as she had believed. She thought often about her daughter Emma, about the peace Emma had dreamed of, about the cooperation between species that Emma had believed possible. The galaxy Sarah had created was nothing like the one Emma had wanted. It was a galaxy built on fear and dominance rather than trust and cooperation. On her deathbed, old and tired, Sarah gave one final interview. The reporter asked her if she had any regrets about how the war had been conducted. Sarah was silent for a long time before answering. "We did what we believed we had to do. We stopped a genocide. We prevented the enslavement of our species. We ensured that humanity would never be vulnerable to that kind of betrayal again. Those are good things. Important things. But we paid a terrible price for them. 31 species extinct. Trillions dead. A galaxy that fears us rather than trusts us. A human civilization that knows only how to dominate, not how to cooperate. My daughter dreamed of a different galaxy. A better one. We did not give her that galaxy. We gave her a galaxy where humanity stands alone, surrounded by species that submit to us out of fear rather than respect. I do not know if that was the right choice. I will never know. But it is the choice we made, and we have to live with it." She died 3 days later. Her funeral was attended by billions of humans and broadcast across the galaxy. The surviving alien species sent representatives who spoke respectfully of Sarah's leadership and wisdom. But privately among themselves, the aliens spoke different words. They spoke of the Breaker Queen, the human who had ordered the extinction of 31 species. They spoke of her not with respect but with fear, and that fear would shape galactic politics for centuries to come. Admiral Marcus Hayes outlived Sarah by 5 years. He spent his final years running military academies where young humans were taught the lessons of the war. The most important lesson: never trust anyone who is not human. Never assume that peace means security. Never show mercy to enemies until they are completely broken. Never forget what the Council tried to do. Never, ever let humanity become vulnerable again. Hayes's teachings became doctrine in the human military. Generations of officers learned to think of aliens as potential threats that needed to be monitored and controlled. They learned that humanity's survival depended on absolute dominance, on maintaining military superiority so overwhelming that no species would dare to challenge them. They learned that the only security was fear, and the only peace was the peace of the powerful over the weak. 200 years after the war, the galaxy had stabilized into a new order. Humanity controlled the central regions of explored space. The 16 restricted species remained on their homeworlds, slowly rebuilding within their limits. New species that emerged were carefully integrated into a galactic system that was fundamentally different from the old Council. There was no pretense of equality. No fiction of cooperation between equals. Humanity was dominant, and everyone else accepted that dominance because the alternative was extinction. Some humans argued that this was what survival looked like, that the galaxy was peaceful because humanity had the strength and will to enforce peace, that the restricted species were alive because humanity had shown restraint when it could have shown none, that the new galactic order, though based on fear, was better than the false friendship of the old council. Others argued that humanity had lost something essential in the war, that the willingness to commit genocide even against species trying to enslave them had changed humanity fundamentally, that a civilization built on domination and fear could never be truly at peace, would always need enemies to justify its power, would always be one crisis away from another round of extinctions, that Emma Chen's dream of real cooperation between species had been sacrificed on the altar of security. Both were right. Both were wrong. The galaxy that emerged from humanity's fury was neither as good as optimists hoped, nor as bad as pessimists feared. It was simply different. The age of the Galactic Council, with its pretense of equality and cooperation hiding plans for enslavement, had ended. The age of human dominance, with its guarantee of survival bought at the price of isolation and fear, had begun. And across the galaxy, in schools and homes and government chambers, a new generation learned the story of how humanity had responded to the Council's betrayal. They learned about Earth's sacrifice, about the 31 extinct species, about Sarah Chen and Marcus Hayes and the choices they had made. They learned about the Harvest Protocol and the fury it unleashed. And they learned the lesson that would define galactic civilization for millennia. Never, ever threaten humanity. They had proven they would rather die free than live as slaves. They had proven they would sacrifice their own homeworld to deny it to enemies. They had proven they would commit genocide rather than accept enslavement. They were the breakers, the species that had shattered the galaxy and rebuilt it in their own image. Some called them saviors. Some called them monsters. Most called them both, because humanity had saved itself by becoming something terrible, something that would haunt the galaxy's nightmares for generations. They had won their freedom and their survival, but they had paid for it with their innocence, their trust, and their dreams of true peace. And in the end, that was the real price of fury. Not the species they destroyed, but the species they became.